Should you play an old beat 'em up game called Final Fight? Yes, because it is a lot of fun. Today, we're looking at the roots of Final Fight, its arcade dominance, the bumpy road of its home ports, and why this brawler still matters over 3 decades later.
Guy, Jessica was kidnapped.
Jessica?
My sweetheart since childhood.
The Mad Gear must pay. She's my friend too. Count me in.
Anyone can pick up this game because it's simple, but it does require a bit of strategy. I first played this on the Super Nintendo and later on the Sega CD. I was also able to play on some of the arcade cabinets, but they were soon overshadowed by the much more popular Street Fighter II. You could probably get to the end of the game in one sitting, as it takes about 1 solid hour to complete. In 1986, Technos Japan released Neketsu Koha Kunio-kun, known in the West as Renegade. It was one of the first games to place players in gritty urban environments, fighting thugs across multiple planes of movement. A year later, Technos struck gold with Double Dragon. Suddenly, the formula clicked. 2-player co-op, weapons, and a simple rescue story that anyone could jump into. Double Dragon dominated the arcades, and its influence on Final Fight can't be overstated. Capcom saw the success and decided to take the concept further. Originally, Final Fight wasn't even called Final Fight. It began development under the title Street Fighter 89, intended as a sequel to Capcom's fighting game. That's right, this was going to be the original Street Fighter 2. But as the project evolved, it became clear this wasn't a one-on-one fighter. Instead, Capcom leaned into the side-scrolling action that was exploding in popularity. They renamed it Final Fight, set it in the crime-ridden city of Metro City, and gave us a simple but effective story. The Mad Gear gang has kidnapped the mayor's daughter, Jessica, and it's up to Mayor Mike Haggard, her boyfriend Cody, and his friend Guy to clean up the streets. A pro wrestling mayor in suspenders, a knife-wielding street fighter, and a ninja sidekick. It was arcade storytelling at its best. Final Fight walked so Street Fighter 2 could run. When Final Fight hit the arcades in 1989, it was a revelation. Powered by Capcom's CPS-1 hardware, the game featured massive, colorful sprites that made Double Dragon look tiny by comparison. The gameplay was varied. Each character had their own set of moves, whereas Double Dragon just basically had a palette swap of the same character. It was almost like playing an anime, which were starting to pick up steam in the West. Metro City felt alive. Neon-lit streets, bustling subways, and grimy back alleys full of thugs. Players could feel the weight of each punch, slam, and pile driver. The co-op gameplay made it even more addictive. 2 players could team up and tear through waves of enemies together. Of course, it was also a quarter muncher. Final Fight was brutally difficult, designed to drain pockets as fast as possible. But that didn't matter. Arcade players lined up for the chance to brawl through Metro City. The level with the fire was probably where a lot of people gave up because it was such a cheap tactic to bring the lives down. Thankfully, you can continue as much as you like on the home ports.
Oh my god!
After conquering the arcades, Capcom brought Final Fight home. The Super Nintendo port arrived in 1990, and fans quickly noticed the cuts. The 2-player mode was gone, Guy was missing from the roster, and some enemy designs were censored. Later versions of Final Fight Guy tried to patch things up, but the limitations of the hardware showed. The Sega CD port fared much better, adding voices and smoother gameplay, though it still wasn't a perfect match for the arcade. Despite these flaws, for many players, these home versions were their introduction to Final Fight. As I said, I played it first on the Super Nintendo. And even watered down, the game's personality still shined through. Since my first exposure to the game was through the sanitized home port, I won't comment on the character controversy. The story in the game is not as important as the action. I did notice in the arcade versions of the game were much better looking and animated. Final Fight spawned sequels and spin-offs, though none reached the same heights as the original. Still, the characters lived on. Mike Hagar became a cult favorite, showing up in Saturday Night Slam Masters and Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Cody and Guy found new life on the Street Fighter Alpha series. And beyond Capcom, the game's influence was huge. Sega's Streets of Rage was a direct response to Final Fight. So why does Final Fight still matter today? Because it was the blueprint for everything that came after. Its big characters, over-the-top moves, and urban setting defined what we think of when we hear beat 'em up. It was simple, yes, but that simplicity is part of the charm. You weren't worrying about combos or stats. You were just cleaning up Metro City one thug at a time. I personally think retro games are coming back because a game should be fun, and this game is just that. Now, again, Final Fight was not the first beat 'em up. That honor goes to games like Renegade and Double Dragon. But it was the one that perfected the formula. It turned a genre into a phenomenon, inspired countless imitators, and left a legacy that still resonates today. Over 30 years later, it's still worth playing, whether you're revisiting the arcade original or discovering it for the first time. This is the game that defined the streets. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this deep dive into retro gaming history, be sure to hit like, subscribe, and share your own Final Fight memories in the comments. Did anybody play the game? And if you did, who is your main character?
Where are you going? How can you just walk away now?
I want to stay here with you, Jessica, but I can't. Not while evil still stalks the street.
Oh, Cody.